a Chilean professor. I'm actually the first Latino teacher in the school with a full-time. Kind of cool. And I have someone to thank for that, which is Sarah Bartlett, our dean, who's over there. Thank you so much for being here too. The New Latin Wave, as you see, in this section is going to be about journalism, but the New Latin Wave is a series of events around visual arts, film, music, that were started by my Chilean fellow over there, Mauricio Sotio Diaz, who brought the wine, so we're cool. Thank you for being here, Mauricio.
Thank you for hosting.
And so we started talking about why not also do it in journalism. New York is the capital of journalism, as they say, and there's a lot of amazing things happening in this bilingual space, in this social cultural space where we are in many places at the same time, and we're pretty comfortable speaking both languages, living in both languages, up to the point that pioneers like Andrea Gompf from Remezcla are now being copied by big newsrooms in the US, saying, well, there's this big space that we can look at. Big audio and radio is also looking at people like Carolina Guerrero and Daniela Alarcón from Radio Ambulante, who is here. And also, it's a big reflection of people like Gustavo Martínez, who's also here, who's a journalist, who writes and speaks very well in both languages, dominates audiovisual, and has worked in small and medium and big newsrooms, not just in the US, but also in Mexico. And yet, still some people, when he shows his resume, they ask him, have you ever worked in a US newsroom? He might not know.
How do you speak English kind of thing? Beautiful country.
So today that's how we're gonna do it. We're gonna do short presentations by each one of our guests, and then we're gonna follow up with a panel where we will open up to questions and conversation right away, so we can spur this conversation as a collective rather than us facing you alone. Is that okay? So in order of punctuality, I'm going to invite Carolina first, then Gustavo, and then Andrea. Beautiful.
Hello. Hi, thank you for having me here. Can you hear me there? Can you hear me? Yeah. So, hello, my name is Carolina Guerrero. I'm the executive director of Radio Ambulante. I'm going to start with anyone familiar with Radio Ambulante here? Show of hands. Okay, so we are, I will tell you what we are, but it's a radio project, it's an audio project, so I'm going to start with some audio. Let's listen to some of what we do.
Empatado, porque no ver tantos cadáveres, no encontrarse en el río 7, 8 seguidos, muy berraco, y en la noche.
Bueno, venía llegando a mi casa y vi una gran cantidad de jóvenes vestidos de negro en el medio de la calle, pero no distinguí ninguna cara, ¿no?
Poco significa ser un hombre bien responsable en sí mismo. Si tú chupas, mañana trabajas.
Entonces la gente subía al cerro y él veía a la Virgen y hablaba con ella, y yo le decía cosas y él me transmitía.
Bueno, yo soy una persona igual que cualquiera, hace casi 3 años que estoy haciendo esto, entonces siento la necesidad de decir que no estoy loco.
No, Michael, ¿cómo te llamas? Miracle. Dije, ¿eh? Miracle.
Nunca pensé que ser director de la biblioteca significaba convertirse en una especie de Sherlock Holmes.
Prendimos el informativo a las 6 de la mañana y estaban dando una noticia a la fuga.
Y me quedé en medio de la pista. Presidente de Honduras, electo democráticamente por el pueblo, en medio de la pista en ropa de cama en Costa Rica.
So in 2007, the novelist Daniel Alarcón was hired by the BBC to produce an audio documentary in Peru about Andean migration. So he traveled there with a British reporter and he conducted a bunch of interviews, and then like a month later he received the final mix of the documentary, and he was very disappointed when he realized that most of the voices that he found more interesting and compelling were left out of the documentary. The reason they were in Spanish. So Daniel was left with a question. What if there was a space for those voices? No? What will it sound like? So 6 years ago, Daniel and I decided to create that space. We were inspired by those public media radio shows that you listen to in the US, like This American Life, Radio Lab. Are you familiar with those, everybody? Okay, so we wanted to create something that had no counterpart in Spanish, and that was Radio Ambulante. We wanted to hear like the voices of Latin America told by themselves. Like how it sounds. We wanted to listen how Bogota or like Lima or Mexico City sounds like. But we wanted those voices to tell their own stories. So we created Radio Ambulante. Radio Ambulante is a project of narrative journalism sound. Our stories are complex, nuanced, entertaining, and moving. A story of Radio Ambulante has an arc. It has very clear and defined characters, a beginning, an end. An arc is like a plot, no? It's like a movie plot, but it's not fiction. It's journalism, personal journalism. And those stories are surprising, are unique. When we started, we were like very enthusiastic about this idea, and we took this to many people to share what we wanted to do, and we listened things like this. Like Mexicans only listen to content that comes from Mexico, Argentinians for Argentina, Colombians for Colombia. So they were like, we were told by these like experts on radio that we were like entitled to fame. That was 6 years ago, in 2011. No, we also, but we were like really, we kept our moral up. We knew that we had something because we were that audience. No, we wanted to. As you see, I'm not a native English speaker, but I have lived here for 17 years. But and I shared with my co-founders, Daniel and other founders that we found when we were creating Radio Ambulante, that we shared something. We were consuming media in English because the kind of content that we wanted to consume in Spanish was not available, particularly these kind of stories. But there was a lack of that kind of content, no? That more personal stories, human stories that were far from the stereotype of Latino and Latin American. So we wanted to listen that. So we knew that we had something. So we kept working and put together a project, launched a Kickstarter campaign, raised a bunch of money, like $46,000, and then we were ready to launch our first season. And we also received, we were sent this email to introduce Radio Ambulante to many people in the industry, and this is very fun because we're reading at it recently, no? Producing such stories sounds great, but to what end? And what, podcasts? No, that was 6 years ago, no? Today, that's different because podcast is booming, but 6 years ago, it was kind of like trying to convince people that there was an opportunity for this kind of thing. So at the time, we were sure that political borders are real, but cultural and linguistic borders are very fluid. We also consider the United States another Latin American country with more than 50 million people living here who can understand Spanish. And we also know that technology has changed the way we produce and create content. So with that in mind, we have been working for 5 years since launching. 6 years, and we launched the show 5 years ago. Our balance is good. We have produced more than 60 episodes for more than 20 countries. We have hosted 4 sold-out live shows. First year, we had like 2,000 downloads of our episodes in 2012, but last year we had 1.5 million downloads. We even won an award, the most important journalism prize in Colombia is the Gabriel Garcia Marquez Journalism Prize for Innovation, where the gentleman here used to work. So who are our listeners? They're Spanish-dominant Latinos in the US, second-generation bilingual Latinos, also, like who move very comfortable on both sides, like everybody here, I guess, and I guess me too. Spanish language learners, and Latin Americans. 64% of them live in the United States, 36% in Latin America, kind of that. There is like a little percentage of people in Europe and other countries. 81% of them are between 18 and 45 years old. 80 have a college degree. We hope that to become more mainstream. 56% are Latino. There are many people who are not. In order to reach that audience, and also that we are a small team working with limited resources, we have created partnerships. So for example, we partnered with Imprint magazine. For example, this is a story that we produce, and we partnered with the New York Times magazine, or we partnered like with other shows in the industry. We could produce stories together. And I think I just want to leave you with that, just in closing, that we consider ourselves a Latin American podcast that is produced in the US. And we are also an American podcast that is produced in Spanish. And we know that duality on this increasingly diverse America will be the key for our success. This is what we feel that is right now, right to the point in the United States. Thank you.
Keep writing down those notes for the questions. We're going to go with Gustavo now, and then last but not least, with Andrea.
Hola, buenas noches, good evening everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So my name is Gustavo, I'm a student here. I'm a first semester student, hopefully graduating, I say hopefully, because I really don't know. Graduating this semester. It's been quite a ride here at CUNY, and some of my fellow students here can attest to that. As Miguel said, yes, I'm pretty comfortable in navigating in both languages. My background is in print media and Spanish print media. I worked in places like Juarez, Mexico, El Paso, Texas, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Dallas, y Nueva York. And well, not to get into that, but this is something that I produced thanks to my time here at CUNY. It's a project called Football Soccer. It's addressing the sport. I was a sports journalist in my prior life, and my interest was not so much in the spectacle and the goals and the players and what have you. I mean, I do enjoy the sport, but was more in how it becomes social, or it becomes part of our fabric in a way. We produced a show addressing that. We produced a show with WNYC, or New York Public Radio, last semester called Football Soccer. And it was a night of storytelling and soccer, just people who came of age through the sport. And this is the promo that we did for the show.
Para nosotros es una alegría que sea el centenario aquí en Estados Unidos.
Está muy bonito que así sea aquí por primera vez.
Este es Ecuador. Estoy apoyando a Ecuador, según como jueguen.
I'm supporting Mexico. They're going to make it to the finals. I'm pretty sure about that.
Está apoyando ahí a la selección de mi país, esperando que venga a hacer un buen papel.
Acá están casi todos los uniformes que van a usar. La que más se ha vendido ahora es México.
Es que México aquí siempre ha sido local. Aquí es la segunda casa. Esperemos que ahora que sea campeón.
I'm very excited. I want to go to stadium to see Mexico. I'm pretty sure Mexico is going to win this year. Mexico!
So, I mean, Miguel can correct me if I'm wrong, but we were
wrong.
yeah, we were completely wrong in that little kid just, I mean, he was charming enough, but yeah, when he broke my heart, I mean, I was like, kid, you just made me look so wrong. But it was a great experience, I can say that. So, a little bit of what she was mentioning earlier about Remulante, one of the downloaders. I love your show, I must say, and I also love Remezcla. I've actually contributed to Remezcla one article for this actually football soccer. Carlos Llamosa, one of our speakers that night, was featuring Remezcla. His story is very impressive. He's a formidable person, but he was one of the stories that we featured, and it talks about that America, that new U.S. that you were alluding to. That it's that's why I also call it football soccer, because it's not just the white bros, you know, like in the sport, or the immigrants in the Sunday league playing, but it's their children. It's this new fabric that is coming into place in the country, and that I'm also really happy to see more of us in school as well. We're not only with Miguel, but also the students, and see us reflected in somebody in the faculty that's pretty cool here at schools as well. So that project was really fascinating with WNYC. I think there's an invite here. MSNBC picked up the story. NPR picked up another story from us. And then this was like a little thing that didn't make it, but it's just reflecting what the U.S. in general, like in Queens specifically.
El fútbol es un juego muy increíble que todo el mundo practicamos. Eu continuo aqui mesmo, aperfeiçoando o imperfeito, dando a perfeição, que a perfeição é
Todo es pasión, somos todos los latinos, si no se dan cuenta, todos los latinos juegan y es algo de la vida diaria de los latinos.
And I'm also like football soccer is also this medium to curate content. Again, not specifically about the sport, but about the sport itself. Like this, there's news on different fronts of the football world. Like this one, you know, like this Arab Israeli player who and that's what I've been doing with football soccer. Another thing that I was able to do here at CUNY is Donde Anda Lupita? Where's Lupita? This is very fun. This is a very fun project that I love. The first thing that I did actually here at CUNY with my fellow classmates, actually, many of them have contributed to this. It's documentation of the operations of the Virgin of Guadalupe, Our Lady of Guadalupe, throughout the world, and in many, not necessarily religious ways, but in many aspects. Like we went to Israel this summer in Palestine, and I went to a Palestinian restaurant, and I found La Virgen de Guadalupe right there. This guy explained to me why they have it there. Basically, she said it's the mother of God, and I was like, okay, well, I mean, I'm not really believe, but it's beautiful to see, you know, like it's as a Mexican, you're Guadalupano even if you don't want to, you know. In El Salvador, the most popular virgin or the most popular saint is Virgen of Guadalupe. In Juarez and different parts of the world, I've had from Japan, from Argentina, from Uruguay, many places. And it's just a very fun experience, and people are like excited when they send me the photo and then they tweet it or repost it or stuff. So it just, like this one is most beautiful. A classmate from here saw this guy wearing this jacket in the subway. I mean, just to show not only the Virgin, but how our culture has transcended or has erased the borders. As you were saying, they're fluid, they're just imaginary, I think. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've done here in school, just to showcase the Latino identity in this part of the world, or in the country, and how it's presenting everything else.
Thank you, Gustavo.
a little bit about Nuestra, for those of you who are not familiar with us, and a little bit about our origin story and our mission and what we're trying to do. So, Nuestra started in 2006, so actually in December we'll be turning 10. It's been a long journey. And it was a very grassroots initiative. I'm sure that I'm preaching a lot to the choir here, but it was born out of this frustration. A group of young people, millennials, who felt like they didn't really see their reality reflected. We, at that time, only had kind of legacy mainstream Latino media to look to, Univision, Spanish language media. And we felt like it didn't really represent our reality. And at that time, there was also a lot of exciting new media projects. You know, this is when Pitchfork and Vice were starting. But in the Latino space, there really wasn't anything that was covering our culture, and these other emerging platforms were not really covering Latino culture either. So there was sort of this void. So this group of friends came together with this hunger to tell these great stories about Latin culture that they really weren't seeing anywhere else. As I said, traditional media really wasn't relevant to us. So we started as a newsletter. Back then, we were just compiling event listings of our friends who were doing exciting things in the creative scene, music, film, food. And along the way, it really started picking up steam, and we found a lot of other really like-minded people who felt the same way that we did. And that sparked something. So our newsletter expanded. It moved to LA, it moved to Chicago, it moved to Miami and to other cities where burgeoning Latino populations were hungry for content that spoke to them. And we all really shared this mission to really try and shift the way that Latino culture was perceived in the US. We felt we were more than Don Francisco, and we wanted to really shatter those stereotypes. And we not only wanted to tell stories that no one was telling, but we wanted to do them in an execution that we felt we didn't see, a level of quality, a level of innovation in the packaging of the stories. So we really wanted to try to redefine the standard for digital storytelling. We started it with no money, just a scrappy initiative back then. But today, we have full-time staff in LA and in Mexico City. We have a network of 25 plus publishers, like-minded publishers who are in our network. We're nearly 30 full-time employees. And we also have a huge freelancer web that is really international all over Latin America, in Europe. It's really all over the world, wherever the diaspora is. And our business model, so we function as a publisher, that's the side that I work on as editor. But over the years, we also have been approached by brands who saw the audience that we were reaching and were eager to find an authentic way to talk to them as well. So there's a part of our business that provides brand services, working with them. And then entertainment. I'm sure as you guys all realize, things are shifting heavily toward video. People are packaging their content not just on their sites, but seeing how they can live really across a variety of platforms. So that's something that we also work through as an entertainer. And we also create events. You know, we want people to be able to experience the culture beyond just the .com. So we have proprietary event series that we do all over the US and all over Latin America. And I have a little video here. Oh no, this is not. Hold on. Sorry. This is what I wanted to show you.
Shout out to the Mexico, man. Cap G, they've been rocking with me since day one.
Matter of fact, you need to listen in.
mejores tacos en los Estados Unidos.
Esos contrastes que te definen, ¿no?
While you have fun.
Exploración.
So that should give you a little bit of a sense of our mission.
That was a good video.
Thanks. So when we think about our content and sort of what Remezcla's place in the landscape is, I think there are three sort of main prongs that we think of ourselves as. One is a resource for discovery. And actually, my story of how I came to Remezcla, I've been there for about 4.5 years now, is a very personal one and is very connected to this. To give you a little bit of background about me, my mother's Peruvian, my dad is gringo. I grew up biculturally, bilingually, or ambiculturally even, I would say. And I always felt very connected to my Latinidad, but I, much like the founders of Remezcla, didn't really feel as I got older that I was seeing cultural representations that really excited me. And so when I went to college, I kind of felt like I started distancing myself a little bit from that side of my identity, simply because, you know, the most exciting new music I was encountering, I didn't really have a way to get in touch with these things. And it wasn't until 2008, when I moved to New York, that I very by chance happened to stumble upon Remezcla, and it was because I randomly went into a bar where a party called Que Bajo was happening. I don't know if any of you guys know that party. But it was in its earliest days, and I heard this music that I had never heard before. It just blew my mind. It was this mix of you know, cumbia rhythms and salsa rhythms, but with really also electronic contemporary production. I'd never heard anything like it. I was super excited by it. So I approached the DJs. I was like, what is this? This is amazing. And they explained their party to me, and they told me, hey, if you like these events, you should check out a website called Remezcla. They cover this kind of stuff a lot. So that's how I found it. And when I went to the page, I was just so blown away by this voice that I had never seen before, something that was young, it was informal but informative, and it was really covering a side of Latin culture that I had never known existed. So that's what we really aim to create for our audience, is just helping people discover the multifaceted nature, the diversity of really what there is out there. The fact that like Latino is not a genre, it really, you know, it's not a monolith. It means so many different things. That, on the flip side, is also a challenge. You know, how do you talk to an audience that comes from 20 plus nationalities, a variety of dialects? As Carolina mentioned, borders are fluid, but you know, we're dealing with people who have diverse experiences and points of view on race, gender, sexuality. Second, third generation people who only speak Spanish, who only speak English, who speak Spanglish. And how do you create an authentic voice that kind of speaks to this community? So that's something that we task ourselves with every day when we think about our content. And I have some examples here that I can show you that kind of reflect that approach. So let's see what we have here. So this story, I think, is an example of something that we try to do. This was a companion quiz to a much longer in-depth feature about Dominican naming practices that explored the sociocultural. This is like a fun part of the story, but there was a much more in-depth and researched story about naming practices, and this was just a fun game to add to it. And this, I think, reflects sort of an approach that we take, which is Latinos want to see themselves represented, but we also don't consider ourselves to be in a box separate from everybody else. You know, we want to stand on the same stage as everybody and participate. So I think this is an example of the way that like Latin culture and something like Game of Thrones, which is like a completely mainstream phenomenon, can really come together in an organic way and show that, you know, you don't have to make something that's only for Latinos. This is a fun quiz that anybody can take and kind of relate to and have an entry point. And by the way, we made this and I still can't pass it. It's a tough one. This is a piece that we did in our sports section for World Cup. And we tapped writers from the 10 Latin American countries that qualified plus Spain, so it was 11 countries, to kind of narrate the most iconic moment from their country's World Cup history. We partnered with an illustrator in Mexico to create these cards, which also were collectible prints And on the back, as you can see, is an animated version. So this execution, I think, just speaks to, again, what we're trying to do is not just tell great stories, but really package these stories in a way that's really exciting and fresh and innovative. This story is one of my favorites from the last year in our music section. And I think just also represents the importance of having people who are bilingual who are looking beyond the surface level of the story. D'Angelo put out his album Black Messiah in 2015, I believe it was. And he had a song on there called Really Love that had a spoken word introduction in Spanish. I read a lot of reviews of this song, and nobody really had kind of touched on that spoken word intro, or presumably because they just didn't understand what she was saying. So I listened to it and I was super intrigued to understand who this was. This woman was only credited by her first name in the liner notes. And I tried to track her down. I contacted the engineers and the producers of the album. They were all very mysterious about it and didn't want to tell me too much. But we later discovered that her name was Gina Figueroa, and she had a very interesting backstory. She had actually co-written this song. She had had a past relationship with D'Angelo. Apparently she inspired Spanish Joint, for those of you who are D'Angelo fans. And as a result of this story, she was actually able to make a case for herself to be properly credited as a co-writer on the song, which became a big deal because the song eventually was nominated for a Grammy. So she's now a Grammy-winning songwriter, because we kind of wanted to dig and find out this element of the song, and that was because her spoken word intro really provided a different level of sort of textual analysis to the lyrics that nobody else was really poking into. So I think that's also just an example of kind of how we try to find the story in the story, and find the aspects of how Latin culture really are influencing the mainstream that a lot of people overlook. And this is another example, again, of intersection of pop culture, yes. Everybody knows Drake. We had some fun with this story, kind of. We saw a meme out there about Drake looking like, you know, a Dominican uncle in the country club. And our music editor put together sort of an evolution of how Dominican culture was influencing him. He was using Dominican slang in his lyrics. He was going to the DR to shoot his music videos. And this kind of like sparked off into a whole hashtag, and a whole bunch of parodies kind of came out of this. And again, it's just an example of, I think, how we blur the boundaries, or we don't really see boundaries between Latin culture and mainstream culture. We see it all as kind of one spectrum. So those are just some examples of our content and our work. I think that was all I had. Oh, I didn't want to overlook really quickly. I'll show you guys these before I take too much time. We also have a food section. In our food section, much like in the rest of our sections, we're really trying to highlight emerging aspects of Latin American cuisine. Everybody's had a taco. We love tacos too, but there are a lot of cuisines that people are less familiar with, and those are the ones that we're really trying to highlight. Not everybody has, for example, in this piece, this is spirits that you may not have heard of. Mezcal is super trendy and popping off now, so we wanted to highlight other spirits in Latin America. And that's what we really are trying to do in our food section. And in our film section, we're trying to highlight emerging talent in TV, film, web series content. And we produce a lot of guides to help people filter through everything that's available to stream online. Because there is a ton of content, really amazing content out there, and a lot of people don't know. Even with the algorithms that are supposed to help you sort of filter through and find things, it's difficult to find Latino and Latin American content. You know, it's usually lumped into a foreign film section, and it's also hard to discover things you don't know exist. You know, a taste algorithm only shows you things that you already like. So if you don't know it's out there, it's hard to find. So that's something that we try to answer with our content in our film section. So overview for us.
So I have a bunch of questions, but I want to start in a different way. I want to give the mic to anyone who wants to start with a question to warm this panel up. Anyone? Yes? Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Edna. I met Miguel at the ICMA in Washington. Nice to meet you. Great projects. Felicitaciones, both of you. I have basically, well, 4 questions. What are the main challenges that you have? I mean, it's a big one because you start from nothing, from scratch, and then you build such amazing projects. Then I have, as a Latino journalist, I work back home in radio, the biggest one in Guatemala. Anything you need, we can here to help. How can we make these histories for you, or how can we help you? And the last one, how many unique visits you have on your web pages?
Okay.
How many unique visits? Yeah, conversation.
Thank you. 3 questions for you guys.
Well, if I can speak to the challenges, I guess I'll take that start. There's a big barrier. I mean, even though we as Latinos know more what's going on out there, what's happening in the streets and with the people, with current society, as a journalist, trying to break into mainstream, if you want, it's really difficult to do it because there's still minds that are not attuned with today's times. You know, you still find people that don't get it, that they don't know what the story is, or they might even question your journalistic integrity by thinking that because you're covering immigration, you're Latino, you might have a bias. Yes, we do have a bias, but just like them. You know, it's your objectivity is kind of weird thing that we don't want to get into right now, but it's not what I think it is. So there's many challenges. It's just breaking them down, breaking those barriers, not only to have the stories that we want to cover, but bring the stories from our people, from our gente, to the mainstream, to a larger audience without the need to making a reference of Mexicans and tacos and Cinco de Mayo, you know, like the customary thing that still happens in this country. So breaking that mindset, I think, is one of the biggest challenges. Even like when Radio Ambulante began, and she was showing us that just to, oh yeah, those cute stories, then what? You know, like no, these are historias de vida, historias de gente, historias que nos importan, you know. I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah. Hello. So I'm gonna answer the challenging question, and then I'll go after this round for the other answers. I think, yeah. I mean, we created this Radio Ambulante 6 years ago, and it has always been exciting, but sometimes finding the business model has been hard. Also, I feel, I say it this way, but I feel that we have been like, I think we have a proof of concept, right? And it has been successful, and lately with the podcast boom that is like, I don't know, like happening, or is gonna happen, and with the Spanish language boom as well. I think we have been hearing from many larger organizations, media organizations, but I always have the feeling that they want to pet us. You know, like when you pet a dog, no, like they invite you, they want to hear from you, they like you so much because you're so cool and fresh, and like, you know, I mean, you listen to Andrea and you want to hang out with her, right? I mean, so it's like that, but they don't know. I feel that the industry and in general, like not just media organizations, but also like investors or like advertisers, they don't know what to do with Latinos and with the Latino media. So it's kind of like trying to convince them and explain why this is important, why these stories deserve to be told, and why like there is an audience for that. I mean, just like as I think we all mentioned this, is that we were the audience. No, we want these stories. No, we couldn't find them. But there is always something on the demographics and on the surveys and on the numbers, you know, like when they survey people or when they check the ratings, or they, like all the marketers, companies, they kind of like skip this little niche where we belong, and it's a huge big niche. I think it's a huge and important niche. It's like a bridge. So those are the challenges, like finding that business model. I think finally we're like closer to do it. We had to say no to Good Morning because I mean we were little. We had like challenging moments, and we closed at some points deals that were not good deals for us, and then we learned, and then we prefer to like skip bad deals, right? So it's always like a process of learning, and I think we have mastered this. I think that the fact that we started Radio Ambulante out of a passion is the thing that has kept us like out in business. If I will do it again, I will check the business model first, and I probably won't do it again.
I'm sure you guys saw me vigorously shaking my head. I would agree that I think some of our our biggest challenges are around this business infrastructure. We're trying to push forward this progressive view of identity that is complex and nuanced. And I think that, everything from the census to the way that marketers approach campaigns is much more rigid. We often come up against this, our business model, what monetizes us is advertising and is working with brands. But often, the types of campaigns, they say they want to reach the audience that we reach, they're excited, they say buy our content. But then really what they want is something much more, I think, reductive. Or they have this sort of much narrower view of how you can talk to Latinos. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying in my little spiel, which is that I strongly feel that we don't see ourselves in a separate aisle from everybody else. We're part of the mainstream, we're part of this community. It's not one or the other. But I often think that that is not really reflected in the marketing and business structure that monetizes media. So that I would say is one big challenge for us. And then the other challenge, which I mentioned, is just finding ways to speak to this very diverse audience. I think that every day, in our editorial room, we're challenging ourselves to find the cultural touch points that bring our community together, but also the specificity. If you're Chicano, if you're, in Ciudad de Mexico, born and raised, if you don't have the same perspective, and understanding that, and knowing really well, and having a team that really understands that well, makes all the difference, I think, in being able to create content that has a universal appeal, but that also has a specificity rooted in authenticity. And that's an ongoing challenge that that one's going to do.
But so one question there that connects with this, because I'm from Chile. They say that we're kind of like the Scottish in Spanish because of a really bad way of speaking Spanish. But we also have differences in the slang. My jacket in Spanish and Chilean, please bear with me, it's called chaqueta. And anyone who's from Mexico can tell me that means something completely different in your slang, right? Yeah. And bad, I know. So just think that I'm thinking about jacket in Chilean Spanish. So how do you deal on that? Let's get more concrete on that. Well, we're Latinos, we're in this space. We have things that are interconnected, that make us a whole, but we're also jumping back and forth many things. And also we have very specific local identities, and also generational identities. Because if you're a first generation or a second or a third, the way you consume media or you behave in terms of entertainment or culture are very different. Let's go into specifics, all of you guys.
Sure. I can kind of jump in and say, yes, I agree with you about Chileans. We cover a lot of Chilean music, so definitely have had to become experts in the slang. I love it. Coming to Ernesto, I had to learn all of the ways that Mexicans use huevo or pelo versus Chileans versus Puerto Ricans versus Dominicans. It's definitely, we focus as a team on making sure that people understand. The other thing is that we have an extensive web of freelancers. So we really want to make sure that we're not writing things from a desk, 1,000 miles away from something with no real context for what's going on the ground. We are reaching out to people who are there, who can kind of tell us in their own words and from their own experience and provide context. And then, sort of packaging that through our own filter in our editorial office with our full-time staff. So that's a lot of kind of what goes on there. But it is really a lot about heavily recruiting and keeping an eye out for people who are in all of these different communities who can tell us in their own voice. We don't ever want to kind of come in and speak for something that we can't necessarily speak to others. But it's a big challenge, and we get, as I said, this is a challenge. Even terminology, we get some people who, we use the term Latino, just overall the same, but there are some people who prefer Hispanic. There are people who hate Hispanic, who say that is the colonizer. There are some people who don't want Latino or Hispanic. They say these are both terms that have been imposed on us. I am Chicano, or I am Mexican American or Peruvian American or whatnot. So, there sometimes isn't a way to make everyone happy, but we definitely try to
So we fight a lot on our editorial meetings. Our team, first, like Radio Ambulante works remotely. So we are like, now we're like 10 people in 7 cities. So we work on Skype or mostly not on video. So it's like, it's even harder because we don't have opportunities to bond. So we fight and we turn off the Skype, right? so this thing about the language is very interesting. But like in a practical way that we do is that sometimes we have a story from a place, and there is a word that the character, the person who was interviewed, mentioned. And for example, there's a story called NN from Colombia, and the woman was describing someone, ella era mona, no? She was blonde. Mona is the word in Colombia to say blonde, but in the rest of Latin America means monkey. So for example, there we used the narrator, the journalist she said like, oh, she said Mona. It means blonde in Colombia. So that's a resource, resource that we can fix. But there are other challenges. For example, we produce another story from like about a very isolated community in the Andes in Peru. It's a community they are blind. And the producers, Annie Murphy and Mark Paviles, they went to interview this community, and they are like more indigenous, so they don't speak Spanish as much, and also like culturally they don't answer like I will do, I will overspeak, right? So they just like, it's very hard for the kind of audio that we do we want people to open their hearts and be very expressive and talk about their feelings, and that's very hard. So that was kind of like challenging because we can't have subtitles on an audio story. So we just try to overcome those challenges, and sometimes those stories just keep us working for 2 or 3 months until we manage to solve it. But in general, for Radio Ambulante, I grew up in Colombia, and whoever grew up here in Latin America, maybe had this experience that we used to have all the content the TV shows that came from the United States were voiceover on this plain accent. Even if you were in Cuba or like Mexico or Argentina, you received this plain accent. This plain, like it was supposed the accent of Latin America that was plain. And then we're trying to break that. We celebrate every accent, and we try to leave the characters speak using their accents, and this is kind of the beauty of Radio Ambulante. The first story from Chile, it was hard for me. It was super hard. I had to like repeat it until I got it. So yeah.
I wanted to just jump in super quick to say one other thing, which is something interesting that we're seeing with the younger generation is that because of the internet and because of the way that like music and cultural products can spread so quickly, we're also seeing this mix of Latin American slang. We're covering rappers in Spain who are using Puerto Rican and Dominican slang words they're making trap songs and they're using slang from the Caribbean. And we're hearing Tomasa Real, who's a Chilean reggaetonera, who is using bellaqueo, which is like a word that is more associated with the Caribbean as well. So we're seeing this kind of pan-Latinization a little bit of some of these slang words that's happening through the exchange of culture, which I think is really interesting.
In a way, what I've seen specifically about language in the newsrooms that I work is many Latin American journalists, Salvador, Chilenos, Mexicanos, everywhere, There's a word that many times there's, this confusion or this fight or something, who says it correctly? Straw, pitillo, popote, I don't know, there's as many words as many countries there are in Latin America, just to call one thing, That's the beauty of this language, I guess. When I heard your presentation, your introduction with the radio pieces, the voices, just the wealth of accents and pronunciation, because even in the same country, in Mexico, I'm from Mexico, so the northern accents are not the same as the guys from Mexico City, the Chilangos, or the guys from Yucatan, or the guys from the coast in Oaxaca. Just to be exposed and be able to hear those accents and those voices is a beautiful thing. That's something I like about Radio Ambulante. And reading Remezcla, especially when you went off with the whole Drake, Dominican Drake, that's hilarious, that's beautiful. So I celebrate the language here. I celebrate the culture, the identity. I celebrate who we are, and I'm glad that there's these outlets, these venues to do that.
What about the new outlets? Certainly we have a have data, but also we have that strong belief in the school. I mean, we just created the Spanish, and we call it Spanish bilingual program, not just by accident. It was actually did by Graciela Mochkovsky, who said hi. She's in Argentina right now. She couldn't be here because we saw the need. Actually, people coming to say, hey, we need people that can walk in Chugam at the same time, can speak English and Spanish and be very comfortable in this space. But how are you seeing the media that is doing that? So what happened with Fusion or Univision that's jumping to English also, or New Times in Espanol, or BuzzFeed internationalization, and other many places that are doing this, up to the point that in Niman, Borja Echeverria from Univision said, well, this is going to be a bilingual country, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, there's, I mean, probably the establishment media is not getting it yet, but we are the story. We are the one telling the story. We're not just, we're an audience that wants to be seen in the stories, reflected. Beyond, there's a poem by Puerto Rican, New Rican poet, I forget his name right now, but he would say that why is it that we are, every time we're in the news, we're either in front of the gun or behind the gun. There's nothing, anything else. That's also why I chose football soccer in a way to create this project, just to sort of like not erase, but like find something else, find another commonality, create an outlet, and address a sport that we Latinos love, we are passionate about, but that we see in the States only told by white persons. It's incredible that a sport so popular in Latin America and with Latinos in the US is being narrated and told by white media. So they're trying to experiment, they're trying to get grasp of what's happening. Remezcla is doing it, Ambulante is doing it, but they're still like trying to figure out, how do we approach the Latino community, the Latino products,
And I just will add something. It's also like Latinos are they are ahead the curve in appropriation or like of every media. No, the Latinos, we all Latinos in the US and also Latin America is growing a lot, but like Latinos in the US, they buy the last the last cell phone on the market. They are always there in sync with everything. And I think that it's just like media are understanding also that Latino culture is not just music and I mean everybody so suddenly like moving dancing as Shakira became cool, like for 18 years old and maybe about that at some point, but it's also like on the food. I mean there are many things that you want to like the soccer like that you mentioned, so it's kind of everywhere. It's kind of like taking like it's not just on the it's just like something that is becoming part of like you find like plantains in every grocery store now, or tortillas. There are tortillas everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on one final thing, the example of the Gina Figueroa D'Angelo story that I gave, that was a story that came simply from the fact that I spoke Spanish. I mean, it was literally sitting there. It was a scoop we got that anybody could have gotten, but because nobody spoke Spanish or went to the trouble to get that part translated, her story kind of went untold and went under the radar. So I think it's just a testament to the fact that there are a wealth of stories that are there for people who can speak in Spanish. I also think that something interesting also happening going forward is indigenous languages. I'm seeing this huge need for translators of indigenous languages, stories that are coming in LA in the court system through the wave of like Central American refugees. And I think that that's something that gets left out of Latino media a lot as well, Spanish language and English language. It's something that we're also really trying to expand our coverage of in Remezcla is indigenous culture languages that kind of get marginalized in our community, but I think that that's also the next wave too.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to open it up for questions. Please introduce yourself and make a question. Ask a question. We can share experiences after when they want. Please, you raise your hand. You have a mic there.
Hi, my name is Manolia. I am with the Media Consortium. We are a network of independent media outlets, and so my first question to you all: do you consider your media to be independent media, and what's independent to you? And the second thing is, as a Haitian woman sitting here, I'm in Latino spaces a lot, and I find that Afro-Latinos are significantly underrepresented inside Latino spaces. And so, obviously, I could be pan-Latina, right? But my question for you all is, how do you, in your coverage, to your point earlier about marginalized community, how do you ensure that things that affect the most marginalized folks get lifted inside of your own work? And the last thing is, do you consider what you do at Remezcla journalism? That's for you. And then at Rayo Ambulante, do you consider yourselves, how do you see yourselves in relationship to Latino USA?
Okay, I can start. We do consider ourselves independent, and I say that because we are self-financed. We haven't taken, any outside funding. Everything that we've created, we've done sort of on our own. So we're fully independent in that sense. We don't. This year is the first year that we're going to be trying to raise some investor money, but currently, we own our business and we're fully independent. To answer your second question, yes, part of our core mission, when we talk about redefining Latino identity, is also expanding what that means to include the parts of our community that have too often been marginalized. And that includes Afro-Latinos, that includes Indigenous Latinos, that includes Jewish Latinos and Asian Latinos, and the fact that really there's just such a huge spectrum that often gets left out of the conversation. So that's a core part of what we do, what our mission is. It's a core part of how we try to recruit our writers. It's a core part of how we look for stories. So we're very much committed to trying to uplift and elevate those stories for sure. And can you remind me what your last question was? Oh, do I consider it journalism? That's a very interesting question. In the traditional sense of the word, I guess no, because I don't consider us to be impartial, for one. We have a very an editorial point of view that we're trying to put forward. We also don't really do hard news stories. We don't have boots on the ground reporters who are producing that kind of journalism and breaking stories. I think of us much more as a lifestyle outlet. So we're telling. We do sometimes, this Gina story, I guess, is music journalism. We broke that story, but in the hard news traditional sense, no. And in the sense that we consider ourselves part of the community that we're covering, I would say not in a technical sense. I consider it much more sort of lifestyle feature, human interest stories. It's really more of what we're doing.
So yes, we consider Rayo Ambulante is an independent organization. We have leveraged most of what we have done through partnerships. So we basically work and appreciate partnerships. I think we haven't been able to. It will have been very hard for us to have our name somewhere here in the States without those partnerships. And also still, we see our numbers are little compared to other podcasts. We hope to grow that soon. And I think those partnerships are super important. So what we try to keep is always editorial independence. That's something very important. And we have received offers of big money, people who wanted to really work with us, but we have rejected that. Sometimes, and I guess at some point you just have to face your values and say okay, do I want to do this? And also I haven't mentioned this, but Daniel, my co-founders, is my husband. We have 2 little kids. So he teaches journalism at Columbia University. We will never see money, really money, probably. So when somebody approaches Rayo Ambulante with some money, we have to think about it, no? And we have thought about it many times, and we have said no, this is not what we want, and also the challenges personally as a family are still there. So I guess there, and also for us, it's just that independence. And yes, we consider also, your second question, we consider that a journalism organization. What we do is we fact check everything. There is of course a side, this is historical, right? We trust the character, but we do research. Because it's kind of a personal journalism, kind of so we do as much as we can to interview the character, but what we want to do is kind of give an additional dimension to the story. So we, for example, reported a story in Colombia about this woman who used to work when she was 6 years old, she was taken to work as a domestic aide in a house, and she was basically like treated as a slave for years. And when I found that story on a press with no name, just after the court in Colombia, the judicial system, she found that in the indemnization, she gained, she sued their own employers, and she gained the demand and the sue, and she was successful. But when you read the story, I couldn't find the name, her name, nothing, the details. So we went and found the details and created this incredible documentary, very compelling and hard to listen audio documentary of 45 minutes, and it added another dimension to the story. So yes, this is the kind of journalism that we feel that we need to listen and find more about Latin America.
He has he raises his hand, and then here, and then over there. Is that okay? Yeah.
I was thinking about this project. I don't know if you guys have seen this guy called Chumuel Palacios. He has this project called Pulso de la República, and he's been in in YouTube for a couple of years. But now I think HBO bought the program, and I was thinking about how, and well, before it was super local, talking about politics and things that was happening in Mexico, and now because it's being brought by HBO, it's becoming much more Latin America, but it's not the same. It's the same stories are these irreverence that used to have before. So how do you keep this what you really want to do without become that commercial? Because I'm sure that he's making some money, but I think he's losing pretty much what he already got before just being in YouTube.
Can I jump in on that a little bit? You know that there are no mergers among equals, right? In companies, there's always an acquisition. Someone is buying someone out, and there's a merger. And one of the big mistakes that companies that buy others in a merger they try to do is that they buy the company because of its talent and its freedom, and then when they buy it, they wanted to change their editorial ways, right? Because it has to reflect this other thing, which does not make sense either for a company or when you actually acqui-hire a talent like this. Why would you break the jar that is working when it doesn't make sense? And we've seen it in many ways. I mean, you talked about Don Francisco. When Don Francisco is still around, came to Miami, it didn't reflect anything anymore to the traditional population in Chile. Thank God. But also others in Argentina. There was this great characters, animations that are called Alejo and Valentina that were bought by MTV, and it became really bland.
Well, you gotta keep independent. You gotta remain. You spoke to that very clearly. You don't have to fall into bad deals. You have to look who you partner with, and then launch. Follow through, keep going. If that's a good deal for you, and you keep your integrity or your freedom. I'm familiar with Chumel. I'm not a fan because talking about the Don Francisco humor. Mexico has a thing with its humor that is very offensive in many ways, and even the progressive side, they're still very sexist and racist. So very critical of that too. So you have to look at the deals that you're signing.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that project. I think good for him that he sold it because it's hard to be independent and it's hard. We know how hard it is. Also, Radio Ambulante, for example, is super crafty. Every episode takes months. It's ridiculous craft. So I guess if we partner with someone who demands more content, more volume, that we increase our volume of production, it will be hard for us, no? How do you compromise your quality? So this is something that you need to think about. What I feel is that in media, sometimes you just either like transform, I mean now, these days, you transform yourself or you die. And I guess this is one decision that people take. In our case, because at some point we are a non-profit organization, but we were exploring early this year to become a for-profit, a C Corp, and raise money from investors. And I think we had a good case. And we heard from many, like we received a lot of advice. But we wanted to do something that we couldn't put together the business model. No? So we decided to stay as a non-profit organization. And I think one of the things that we needed to do was change that. And it seemed fun, but it didn't seem quite right for us. So maybe for him it worked. And also like we had a proof of concept. Somebody told me, you have a proof of concept. If you take this path, your proof of concept disappears. What you just said. Yeah, the audience will just like go somewhere else.
When I tried to pitch football soccer to somewhere, the first thing they told me, oh, go to Univision. And I was like, I don't think so. I mean, like, I respect them very much and everything, but I think that the approach to the sport itself is very Mexican, very ladies in miniskirts and stuff like that, and I didn't want that. I knew they were going to try to do something like that. So we approached WNYC, and they were like, oh, fabulous, like, what is this thing? It's a sport, you play it? Yeah, but we also tell stories around it, So I tried to keep that as the mission of the whole identity of the project itself is just addressing the sport from another perspective, not necessarily the spectacle or the more the lowest denominator, I guess.
One of the interesting things there that all of them are speaking. I've co-founded magazines that run non-profit and some for-profit with some success, some failure too. And the thing that you learn is that there are two types of organizations. One that are opportunistically driven, which is I see that VR is a future and I get something in VR, so I try to get in the wave and sell it fast and go somewhere else. Or organizations that are mission driven, that you start like a teacher. Why does a teacher go to teach when they don't get paid really well in high school and they have to work every single day since 8 o'clock in the morning until night? They're on a mission path. So when you have a mission path and that you're doing it because you like it, the good thing about it is that usually it becomes successful because you're not fronting. Now the hard part is to find smart money that actually gets that and does not want to buy or buy in to just try to change it, which makes no sense at all. Monica, you have a problem?
I'm a journalist from Costa Rica, and I'm a student in the CUNY Spanish program. I want to know, how did you avoid to repeat the stereotypes associated with Latinos? What is the editorial judgment that you apply?
I think that sometimes it's too easy for media in general just to, like we were talking about earlier, the Cinco de Mayo stereotype of those tacos, or the mother and the chancla jokes, like how many jokes can you do about that? I think it's also pushing ourselves beyond our conceptions and getting to understand the languages and what are they saying, what is the lingo, what is the slang, what are those Chileans saying, really, because you cannot really make it. So going beyond your preconceptions just to don't fall and repeat what mainstream media is doing, and because just because you want the clicks that they're getting, and they're getting clicks, I don't know why. Try and do something else that speaks to you and to your people, to your audience, because you are the audience. You are who's consuming that media.
Yeah, I think part of it is a gut check, on the team. Like, does this rub me the wrong way? Like, would I feel upset if I felt like the culture was being represented this way? And part of it is just doing the work to reach out to people, because obviously sometimes things fall outside of yourself, right? So, we cover, for example, things in the LGBT community, and I want to make sure to reach out to leaders and advocates to make sure, like, hey, how do you feel about this? What do you think about this angle? To kind of do the work to touch base with people and make sure that we're representing things accurately and fairly. And so I think it's a combination of those two things.
To that point, how do you avoid doing something that at some point might have made sense, which is like celebrate Latino for being Latino in place, beyond and outside the necessary quality, right? Do you understand what I mean? Well, when you just write something about something that has to do with your Latino community, and you talk really good or highlight about it without it necessarily being good. It's just doing it because they're also Latino. And I think that we're beyond that point, really, but how do you see that?
I feel that it's something that you have mentioned, like today, but I feel that there is I mean, we do it like through the story, try to find those stories that are undercover. No, like you mentioned, like African Latino communities. That is like, for example, in an editorial like goals this year. This is on top of our list. Not only African Latino, but African Latino American, African Colombians, African like everywhere, like Chileans, Peruvians. So like they're like really undercover. So we try to push hard to find stories that are not there, like as you mentioned. But also, I feel in the United States is what you have said repeatedly is that while we keep like being, I mean, while like people or like while businesses or foundations or like mainstream, they still have this box to check. That is, you know, like check diversity, check Latino, while we need to hire like that 5% of Latino while we are like a box. It's like, I think sometimes we just receive funding just because they need to check a box. Good that we receive the funding, but sometimes we don't, you know? But it basically like, those are not the reasons. And I feel that those are stereotypes, so people just want us to produce sometimes like certain type of stories. And it's not that we don't cover immigration stories, we have produced many stories, but this is not our focus, no? So it's just the character, the plot, the type of story is surprising, and this is kind of like, we try to find stories that cross Latin American or the Latino culture, because we cover both, no? Latin America and Latino culture, like transversally, you know, like try to find those other things that are, I mean, we are post-Macondo, post-Macondo. We are post-boom, no? Some people say, oh, that's realism, the magic realism. And we're like, no, I'm sorry, like, we're like, we want to cover story about technology and about like a neutral gender, how do you say that? How do you pronounce that? So, you know, like more like out of what people are expecting about Latinos, that is still like very attached to the boom.
There's
Yeah.
also the lack of recognition of stories within the history of this country. I specialize in sports specifically, but in baseball and talking to Afro-Latinos, I mean, everybody talks about Jackie Robinson being the first black player to play in Major League Baseball, but I mean, there's two things there. Major League Baseball took 12 years to integrate fully for each team to have a black player, and many of those first players were Afro-Latinos. One of the very first Latino superstars, Mini Miñoso, who has the numbers, who had the trajectory to be in the Hall of Fame, is still neglected from being in the Hall of Fame. And I guess as Latinos and as people who know the story and the history, we should be the voice to put those stories out there. You know, even when they neglect you, they don't want to hear from you. You should put it out there and tell the story.
But to kind of address your comment again, I agree with you that I think that as much as we want to see Latino journalism grow, that we also need to hold ourselves accountable, and it's okay to be critical of each other in the aim of getting better. You know, I do think that Ramasca is overall a pretty positive space, but we're selectively positive in the sense that if we've decided that we're going to cover this, it's because we think there's something interesting or exciting. Oftentimes we're covering newer emerging artists, so sometimes I get feedback like, you guys should be more critical, but I don't see as much utility in criticizing somebody who has like 2 SoundCloud songs out, you know? They're just starting. They're just exploring what they're doing. But, you know, if we do have space for criticism, and also if we don't respect what you're doing, we're just not going to give you editorial space on our site. I do think that, like, you know, I mean, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but I see, like, I'm excited about the proliferation of Latino voices out there, but I also have started to see a lot of stuff that I think started off as trying to find a place to represent our humor and our jokes, and has now kind of wound up flattening us into these, like, chancla and, like, abuela joke over and over and over again, that it's, like, just creating another caricature, like the same caricature. It's a variation on the caricature that, you know, the U.S. Media has created of Latino. So it bugs me when I see that. I feel like we're more multidimensional, and we should hold one another accountable to that in terms of how we're representing ourselves.
Can I add something very
Yeah,
quick?
she has a question.
I think the other thing is that, for example, we do a lot of partnerships. So I think through partnerships there is a responsibility to try to show them the other side, right? So we pitch our non-stereotypical, like our more rare stories to those partnerships, and they appreciate it. I think that's a good way to break stereotypes all over the way.
Then we're gonna do two more, and then we're gonna drink some vino. Okay?
Hi, my name is Amanda. I work in consumer insights, which, like, that's another story. But first I wanted to say thank you to the three of you for producing such interesting and compelling content. I am a huge Remesa and Radio Ambulante fan. My question is, we've been talking a lot about borders and fluidity and how that is part of your mission in reflecting authentically the plurality of voices, the multiple realities of being Latino, both in the native country and here in the States. But the reality is that, at least here in the States, the largest growing segment of us is second, first, third generation. Many of us who are very concerned with our Latinidad, but who, like myself, like I immigrated when I was very young, basically never grew up in a Latin American country, and look to the media that you guys create and you guys create a platform for to interact with that. That's, for some of us, that's like the space that we have to be, to sort of like exist in that way. So my question is, how do you, like, I recognize that as a very powerful force for me, for many immigrants, for other people like me, and I wonder, like, how you recognize that, and do you consider that when you're creating a piece or when you're deciding what to put out there?
Yes. I mean, what you're saying is what brought me to Remespa. Like, I was born in the U.S., but as I said, I didn't really have Peruvian peers. You know, my interaction culturally was with my family members, but I didn't have a way to know, like, what parties are popping off in Lima, or like what are, you know, people my age listening to. What's cool, you know, other than when I went to go visit family. So that was part of what really drew me to Remespa, was this window into this whole world that I had never known how to find. And that's definitely something, as I said, that we focus on editorially, is really trying to find a way to be a bridge. I think it kind of goes both ways, you know. For people here, it's a way to connect with maybe their roots, things that are going on at home, things that, you know, their parents or their aunts and uncles wouldn't have really been able to connect them to. And going the other way, I think for emerging artists, it's really a platform to find a whole new audience. You know, before, I think when Remespa started, and even still to this day, we're one of the few outlets that cover in English a lot of these emerging, you know, bedroom projects, independent films, and kind of underreported stories for an audience that's reading in English or, you know, light Spanglish. So it kind of goes both ways in terms of creating a bridge and connecting, and it's something we're very conscious of, and that we in fact, like, you know, really want to do, is what we're trying to do.
No, I just remember something that you guys did that I applaud very much, and it goes to the question if you guys are journalism. I think you guys, if not, I mean, you try, but you said you try different things. Standing up to Trump and just saying that you wouldn't publish anything that he says, basically, which the so-called media didn't do. You know, the journalists didn't do. They didn't really take it seriously, and that speaks to the state of media in the U.S. Specifically. Like when he launched his campaign, basically attacking Mexicans, nobody took him seriously. It was like a joke. It was a joke. It wasn't insulting. It was a joke. So that what you guys did, I think it speaks to volumes to the kind of work that you guys do. That's just what I wanted to say.
Yeah, in our case, when I created Radio Ambulante with Daniel Alarcón, but we brought two co-founders more to the group. We were 4 people. I was the only one who was not like a native English speaker, and the 3 of them grew up here. One in Virginia, one between Colombia, California, and the other one in Daniel Peruvian, grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. So I guess they but they had that duality, they felt they needed that connection. So I guess this came just trying to hear trying to transfer something that we listen to and bring our own voices. But for us, it's kind of, we don't focus, we listen to the audience, and we have heard from our audience how differently they connect to our content from different people. We receive emails and all the time. But for us, it's just like based on the story. A good story is universal. And for us, it's just trying to create that story that will connect human beings, and that story that can be interesting, produced from Chile, can be interesting in Bronx, but it's just try to create a very deep connection, and this is what we feel we need to do. We feel that we still need to produce more stories from the United States, because we cover a lot of Latin America and still need to produce more stories here. But it's just it's a matter of bandwidth for us. It's just we are trying to grow our capacity. But I'm trying to look for more stories like that. We had a story that we unfortunately had to kill recently, but it told the story about how there was a movement here in New York created by Latinos, and it has voices, and it was amazing to hear like so many accents on one story, just telling one only story, and I loved it, but we couldn't find the arc. So, but I'm trying to find something more like that. That is more, is that the United States is a Latin American country, and there is a different experience here, and this is important to be covered too, with those hybrid accents. This one, but also like the gringo accent in Spanish.
The U.S. is one of the top 3 countries with Spanish-speaking countries in the world, so that speaks to what we do, who we are.
And then the last thing I'll just add is that I often think of this as not just sort of passively covering culture, but also like promoting, yeah. Also trying to like foment things where they aren't happening. So, and this means, in a tangible way. So we have, as I mentioned, we do events, and a lot of what we think about in terms of the events are giving people a chance to experience things that, maybe if you live in like a secondary market, you're reading these stories, but these musicians never come and play gigs in your city, or you might never get to see this art exhibit in person. So we're very much conscious of that in terms of thinking about how can we create event platforms and experiences and kind of travel around with them and give people a chance to really participate and get inspired and make connections and maybe hopefully start their own thing and kind of get the ball rolling that way. So, part of what we're doing is covering what's already happening, and part of it is also trying to really foster more things to happen and take an active role in creating experiences and stories, inserting ourselves into the stories.
Somebody raised, there in
Hi, my name is Ibelis Martel. I'm a radio journalist from Chile as well. So my question is for Radio Ambulante. So how do you measure how successful a story is? How do you reach your audience? Because podcasting is not a big thing in Latin America. I will say it is here or in Europe, right? And the last question is, how long does it take you to produce, report, and create a story?
6 months per story. Horrible, painful, crafty, expensive, but very fun. We're trying to grow our talent, but yeah, this is like it's crafty, as I said. It's just a story of Radio Ambulante. I mean, producing a story requires a lot of editing. We put a lot of attention on the script. We basically look for people, talent who knows. I mean, when we receive pitches of story constantly all year long. We hope that you can also if you hear a story that is a regular story, tell me, send me a pitch. We're looking for stories all the time, but we hope that the person who produces the story knows how to write. The talent for this kind of radios is writing, not the technical part. The technical part is super important, but that's easy to learn or easy to cover. But writing, it requires a lot of review. The script requires a lot of reviewings, 3, 4, 5 edits. I mean, it's really, really a whole group, 6 people on an editing room reviewing a 30-page script. It's very, very long. Okay, so about successful stories, we measure the downloads. They are always small, but it's very curious because, for example, one of our more successful story was produced in Chile. It told the story about this high school student who went to the most emblematic school in Santiago, where everybody left, like the presidents left there, studied there, and he came and gave a speech that was super controversial against the school. And so we produced a story about him, and that story was like raising, like, I mean, high numbers in Chile, high numbers in other countries, but then it became viral in Brazil. I don't know why. We have Brazil is the 5th country that listens to Radio Ambulante. So it's very hard. We try to see what works, and also like there's another story this year, 240 Aves. It told the story of a blind person in Uruguay who could recognize sounds of birds. And I think that story has been super popular. It's not one of, I mean, it's a beautiful story. I love all the stories, but it's not on my top 5, for example, no? But yeah, that has been like very compelling. It's very human. So I think emails that we receive, people just like send, like, we have received comments like, Radio Ambulante, no se mueran nunca. And I'm like, oh, so yeah, but we hope that we will be, I mean, we hope to grow our audience next year, so that will be reflected on audience growth and numbers and metrics.
And how do you reach your audience?
We do social media and mouth to mouth. We're in conversations with a larger organization to see if we can like use another platform to reach our audience, and hopefully somebody who has like all those departments, marketing, sales, social media, business, you know, like everything. We are like really little people, and everything that is not production, this is my fault. It's me, and now someone else. But it's like 2 people doing so many things. So we hope to find some other organization who can help us with that.
I also would like to challenge one of your hypotheses about podcasts. Chile was one of the first countries that had actually a website called podcaster.cl, and it came too early, actually. But also with, and this is kind of like maybe like too inside Chile, like Chilean radio is pretty bad, you know, in general, because there's none of the production.
You speak Chilean.
But whenever there's an experiment by some specific radio or someone who's doing something, it goes really well. And actually now there's a podcast that's called La Historias Nuestra, Noticias Nuestra.
Yeah, but that comes from the radio.
What?
That comes from the radio station.
Yeah, actually it comes against the radio because the person that creates it wants to do it. But the thing is that it's not working because nobody's doing it, and that's why we don't do it as a media, because it's not working. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, I don't know if it's going to really work, but if you don't try, nothing's going to happen. Then you're sure that it's never going to work. Do you have a question?
Yeah, it's alright. I think I can. So my name is
Monica. I'm a 3rd semester student here. I'm actually Gustavo's classmate. I just wanted to ask, you've been mentioning how you want to expand into Afro, Latinos, and indigenous populations, and you mentioned that Brazil is your 5th group when it comes to audience. So what about Brazilians? Like, have you thought about like expanding into that market, like maybe doing some stories in Portuguese, so Brazilians can also be included in this, because they're also part of Latin America, they're also Latinos. But I think if there's a group that is highly undercover are precisely Brazilians in this like Latino way of journalism.
We do cover Brazil in music and art and film. So they are definitely a big part of our coverage. Your question about producing content in Portuguese is very interesting, though. I don't think that we have ever actively thought about that beyond video content. I think the exciting thing in video content is it really gives an opportunity to tell stories in whatever language they are. The way that technology is moving now, you know, people are watching things in their feed and the sound isn't even on, you know, they're looking at the subtitles. So it really makes it very easy for people to get grabbed by a story no matter what language it's in. I also look to, like, you know, what happened with Narcos on Netflix. I mean, leaving the accents aside, which I know, I'm sure everyone agrees are unbearable, that's a show that was completely bilingual, and it wasn't even, it clearly wasn't targeted to a Latino population because they didn't bother to get the Medellin thing right. It was targeted to a US population, and it's, you know, half of it is in Spanish and with subtitles. So I think that's one way, as we look toward the future, that we could incorporate Portuguese more organically into our storytelling. But we do definitely look to Brazil a lot. There's a lot of, you know, it's it's incredibly rich culture, and we do a lot of storytelling around it. We don't write in Spanish either. Actually, all of our content is in English. As I say, sort of occasional Spanglish, but mostly just English. So.
Yeah, in our case, we're in depth of producing more stories from Brazil. We have produced like soccer stories, and I mean, basically like conversations about like World Cup, Copa America. But it has been always a question for us how to do it. We know that they understand Spanish, but I can't understand it in Portuguese, so I don't think it translates the same. But we are in conversation with a larger organization in Brazil to replicate Radio Ambulante in Brazil next year. Yeah, so it's yeah, that's everything that I can say.
Yeah, and also like having more Brazilian reporters, right? Like Brazilian Americans who can also kind of like have their input on the editorial side of reporting. That's kind of like.
Yeah, we get a lot of pitches. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff. You know, you mentioned Afro-Latinidad, and in Bahia, you know, we've covered a lot of artists who are representing, you know, Afro-Brazilian beauty through photography, through, you know, their lyricism and their music, through protest and activism. So we've done a lot of content around it. We get pitches, definitely, from all over Latin America and from Brazil.
Are you Brazilian?
No, I'm Colombian.
No, just I was curious. There's a WYC former producer, Giselle Regatao, and she's trilingual, as all the Brazilians are. And she was doing a podcast about New York in Portuguese, because and she told me that the reason why is because the first or second group of like of another country that visits New York are Brazilians, something like that. So I think if somebody is Brazilian and wants to produce content, I think producing content about New York in Portuguese would be successful.
And this is the right time to plug in an event that we have next week here, because we're talking about politics. If you guys are into politics, we produce a show, panel discussion just like this one, on Beyond the Latino Vote, voices from beyond the customary news thing that they tell us what the Latino vote is. We have documentarians, we have a Puerto Rican expert, and we have a Brazilian voice who complains or says we are always getting lumped into the Latino group, but there's no Portuguese signs, there's no Portuguese services, and there's no Portuguese Radio Ambulante.
So with that segue, guys, we're gonna kind of here, so we can actually chat, and because we're gonna have to kick you out at 9, okay? So thank you very much for coming. Thank you. Let's give this guy a